Some sentences end with a release date. Others end with silence. In the American justice system, there are prisons where the goal is no longer rehabilitation, deterrence, or even punishment in the traditional sense. These are places where the system quietly accepts different outcome, that some people will leave damaged beyond repair or not leave at all. Not because of what they did, but because of where they were sent. This is not about overcrowding or outdated buildings. This is about institutions designed to strip human beings down to their most basic functions: eat, sleep, obey, and then keep them there long enough for the rest to disappear. In these prisons, survival itself becomes the sentence. From the outside, they look like any other correctional facility. High concrete walls, razor wire, guard towers positioned at calculated angles, the American flag often flying nearby and moving. But inside, time works differently. Here, days are not measured by calendars or clocks. They are measured by counts, doors, and silence. Long stretches of it, silence so deep it presses inward, forcing the mind to fill the void. This is where the worst sentences truly begin, because in the United States, sentencing doesn't end in the courtroom. It continues through classification systems, security designations, and administrative decisions that most people never hear about. Two people can receive identical sentences. One might serve time and return to society. The other may be sent somewhere the system never intended them to recover from. The difference is placement. The worst prisons in America are not defined by length of sentence alone. They are defined by conditions: extreme isolation, chronic neglect, and an environment that erodes identity piece by piece. And once someone is placed there, escape is almost impossible. The first shock comes immediately. New arrivals are stripped of nearly everything that signals individuality. Clothing is replaced with standardized uniforms, personal items are confiscated, even posture is regulated. Where to stand, when to speak, when to move, every action is controlled. In some facilities, prisoners are confined to their cells for 22 to 24 hours a day, not as punishment for misconduct but as standard procedure. The cell becomes the entire world: sleeping space, eating area, bathroom, and isolation chamber. The dimensions are small, the walls are thick, the doors are solid steel. Sound barely travels. Natural light, if present at all, is filtered through narrow slits designed to prevent any real view of the outside world. You can tell when it's day or night, but little else. Artificial light replaces the sun. Over time, the body adjusts, the mind struggles. Human beings are not built for prolonged isolation. Neuroscience has shown this repeatedly. Without regular interaction, the brain begins to rewire itself. Sensory deprivation alters perception. Emotions flatten or explode without warning. In these prisons, isolation is not temporary. It is indefinite. Placement into such facilities is often justified by labels: high risk, gang-affiliated, disruptive, threat to security. But the criteria are broad, and appeals are rare. Once assigned, people can spend years, sometimes decades, under these conditions. There is no countdown clock, no guaranteed review, no clear path out. The system calls this control. The people inside experience something else entirely. Time stretches unnaturally. Minutes feel endless. Days dissolve into one another. Without meaningful activity or social interaction, the mind turns inward, replaying memories, regrets, imagined futures. Some cling to routine to stay sane. Others lose their grip on it entirely. Hallucinations are common. So is paranoia. Sounds become exaggerated. Silence becomes threatening. The absence of human voices begins to feel unbearable. Yet speaking out can make things worse. Requests for mental health support are often met with suspicion. Expressions of distress may be interpreted as manipulation or defiance. In some cases, showing signs of psychological strain results in tighter restrictions. The system punishes the symptoms it creates. Medical care exists on paper. In practice, access is limited. Appointments are brief, conducted through cell doors or restraints. Treatment often focuses on sedation rather than therapy. Medication replaces conversation. Containment replaces care. Violence, when it occurs, is swift and clinical. Use of force incidents are documented, reviewed internally. and rarely questioned. The language used is precise, technical, and detached. Compliance was not achieved. Force was necessary. Protocol was followed. The human cost is invisible in the reports. Family contact deteriorates quickly. Phone calls are short, expensive, and monitored. Visits, if allowed, happen through glass or screens. Physical contact is eliminated. Loved ones hear voices growing. Flatter, quieter, more distant. Conversations repeat. There is little new to say when every day looks the same. Eventually, some families stop calling not out of indifference, but exhaustion. Life outside continues. Inside, nothing changes. In the worst prisons, education and rehabilitation programs are minimal or non-existent. Group activities are considered security risks. Skill building is secondary to containment. The message isn't spoken but clear. You are not here to improve. You are here to be managed. This philosophy marks a shift in how punishment is applied. Historically, American prisons balanced control with some form of communal life. Over time, fear-driven policies and political pressure pushed the system toward extreme security models. Isolation became the solution to every problem. Violence, isolate. Mental illness, isolate. Non-compliance, isolate. The result was a network of facilities designed not to correct behavior but to eliminate unpredictability entirely. But unpredictability is human. When it is removed, what remains is something else. Something hollow, and the effects do not stay inside the walls, for those eventually released. Reintegration is brutal. Years of hyper-control leave people unable to function in open environments. Simple choices become overwhelming. Social interaction feels threatening. Freedom itself becomes a source of anxiety. For others, release never comes. Life sentences, consecutive terms, or deaths inside ensure that these prisons become final destinations. The system quietly accepts this outcome. No headlines, no public reckoning, just continuation. These prisons persist not because they are hidden but because they are tolerated. They operate within the law. They follow policy. They are defended as necessary. But necessity does not erase consequence, because when a system creates environments that reliably break human beings, the question is no longer about crime. It is about design. And this is only the beginning. Because beyond extreme isolation lie places even more severe where neglect, violence, and systemic failure converge into environments where survival itself is uncertain. Those prisons still exist. They are still operating, and people are still being sentenced into them. If isolation breaks the mind, neglect breaks the body. There are American prisons where suffering is not the result of chaos or mismanagement but of routine. Places where deprivation is so normalized that it no longer registers as abuse, where pain is not an emergency but an inconvenience. These are prisons where survival depends less on behavior and more on endurance. In these facilities, the absence of care is the system. Medical units exist, but access is slow, inconsistent, and often conditional. Requests for treatment move through layers of approval. Forms disappear. Appointments are delayed. Symptoms are minimized. Pain becomes background noise. Prisoners learn quickly that reporting illness can carry consequences. Complaints may be interpreted as manipulation. Persistence can result in disciplinary attention. In some cases, seeking help leads to isolation for observation. So many stop asking. Chronic conditions worsen quietly. Infections spread. Untreated injuries heal improperly. Mental illness compounds physical decline. The body adapts until it can't. Staffing shortages are common in these prisons. Medical professionals are overworked or absent entirely. Guards are tasked with monitoring health issues they are not trained to recognize. Emergencies are identified late. When intervention is no longer effective, deaths are logged as natural causes. Investigations are minimal. Patterns go unexamined. This is not accidental. These prisons operate under policies that prioritize cost containment and security efficiency. Healthcare is viewed as a liability. The fewer services provided, the fewer risks assumed. The result is an environment where neglect becomes structurally embedded. Living conditions reflect the same philosophy. Cells are overcrowded or poorly maintained, plumbing malfunctions go unrepaired, mold spreads along walls and vents, heating and cooling systems fail, exposing people to extreme temperatures. In summer, cells become ovens. In winter, concrete radiates cold, clean water is not guaranteed, food quality is inconsistent, sometimes spoiled or nutritionally inadequate. Meals are rushed, portions reduced, substitutions made without explanation, hunger becomes familiar, hygiene supplies are limited, soap, toilet paper, and clean clothing may be rationed. Showers are infrequent or tightly controlled, infestations rats, roaches. Bedbugs are treated as maintenance issues, not health threats. The message is implicit: comfort is not a priority. Violence thrives in these conditions. When resources are scarce and oversight is weak, power fills the vacuum. Gangs establish control over housing units. Informal hierarchies determine access to protection, food, and basic necessities. Those who cannot align are targeted. Fights erupt over trivial disputes. Retaliation cycles escalate quickly. Guards intervene selectively, often after violence has already peaked. Some incidents are recorded, many are not. In these prisons, reporting violence can be dangerous. Informants are exposed. Protective custody is limited or indistinguishable from punishment. Silence becomes a survival strategy. Fear becomes constant. Lockdowns are frequent and prolonged. Entire units may be confined to cells for days or weeks following incidents. During lockdowns, access to showers, recreation, and medical care is further restricted. The response to instability is always the same: less movement, less access, less care. This compounds the damage. Mental health deteriorates rapidly in these environments. Anxiety and depression are widespread. Trauma accumulates without treatment. Suicide attempts increase, often ignored until fatal. When deaths occur, they are processed administratively. Another file closed. Another statistic added. Families are notified late or not at all. Details are sparse. Questions go unanswered. Grief meets bureaucracy. Public awareness remains limited because these prisons are rarely scrutinized. They are located in remote areas. Media access is restricted. Oversight bodies rely on reports generated by the same institutions they are meant to monitor. Accountability dissolves into procedure. When lawsuits emerge, they take years. Settlements are sealed. Reforms, if implemented, are cosmetic. Leadership changes. Conditions remain. The system absorbs criticism and continues. What makes these prisons especially dangerous is not a single extreme policy but accumulation. Isolation layered onto neglect. Violence layered onto scarcity. Trauma layered onto abandonment. Each factor reinforces the others. By the time someone leaves, if they leave, the damage is extensive. Physical health compromised. Psychological stability eroded. Trust in institutions destroyed. Reintegration becomes nearly impossible. And yet, these prisons remain active components of the American justice system. They are not anomalies. They are outcomes. Outcomes of policies that treat suffering as acceptable collateral, of systems designed to manage populations rather than rehabilitate individuals. The question is not whether conditions are harsh. The question is why they are allowed to persist. Because beyond neglect and violence lies the final tier of punishment, places where isolation, deprivation, and absolute control merge into something even more severe, places where the sentence is no longer measured in years, but in how long a person can endure before breaking. And those places are still operating. There are prisons designed to punish, and there are prisons designed to end people slowly. In the United States, the most extreme facilities are not accidents of history. They are deliberate constructions built with the understanding that those sent there are not expected to return to society in any meaningful way. These are places where the system stops pretending rehabilitation is possible. This is where sentencing becomes a form of disappearance. At the highest level of severity sit supermax units, long-term solitary housing, and death row facilities, though different in purpose. They share a common philosophy: absolute control, minimal contact, and total psychological dominance. In these environments, human life is managed, not supported. Death row is often portrayed as a waiting room for execution. In reality, it is a long-term isolation regime that mirrors and sometimes exceeds supermax conditions. Prisoners are confined alone for up to 23 or 24 hours a day. Cells are smaller than standard. Housing, contact with others is nearly non-existent. Recreation, when allowed, takes place in isolated cages. Time stretches unnaturally. Appeals take years, sometimes decades. During that time, nothing changes. The same cell, the same routine, the same silence. Execution dates are set, postponed, overturned, reinstated. Hope becomes unstable. This uncertainty is not incidental. It is part of the punishment. Psychologists have long documented the effects of prolonged death row confinement: severe anxiety, depression, paranoia, and a constant state of anticipatory fear. The mind cycles endlessly between survival instinct and resignation. Some prisoners stop planning altogether. Others stop speaking. Many deteriorate visibly. The body remains alive. The person fades. Beyond death row are permanent isolation units, housing where release is technically possible, but practically unreachable. Placement in these units is often justified by behavior, affiliation, or perceived risk, but once inside, progression out is rare. Reviews are infrequent and opaque. Criteria shift without explanation. Compliance is demanded, but the standards are unclear. A prisoner may go years without human touch. Conversations are limited to commands. Medical care occurs through doors or restraints. Even legal visits are mediated by glass. Identity erodes. Without mirrors, without feedback, without social interaction, people lose a sense of self. Emotional expression flattens. Speech patterns change. Thought process is slow or fragment. Some prisoners report forgetting how to hold conversations. Others lose the ability to read facial expressions. Many experience dissociation. These are not isolated cases. They are predictable outcomes of environments engineered to eliminate humanity. What makes these facilities especially disturbing is the lack of meaningful oversight. Internal reviews are conducted by the same agencies that run them. External inspections are announced in advance. Complaints are filtered through administrative systems designed to deny liability. Transparency does not exist. When deaths occur by suicide, medical neglect, or violence, they are framed as individual tragedies rather than systemic failures. The institution remains intact. The conditions remain unchanged. For those serving life sentences without parole, these prisons become permanent worlds. There is no incentive to rehabilitate, no expectation of release. Aging occurs inside cells designed for control, not care. Mobility declines, chronic illness increases, mental health collapses, compassionate release is rare. Terminal illness does not guarantee relief. Dying prisoners are often kept confined until the end, monitored but not comforted. Death is processed administratively, another number removed from the population count. Families are left with questions they will never have answered. Children grow up knowing only the absence. Communities inherit and resolve trauma. The damage spreads outward. These prisons persist because they are politically convenient. They operate far from public view. The people inside lack voice, credibility, or sympathy in the public imagination. Suffering becomes invisible. When reform is proposed, it is framed as a security risk. When conditions are criticized, responsibility is deflected. The system survives by dispersing accountability until no single actor appears culpable. And so, nothing changes. The existence of these prisons forces a final question: what is the purpose of a sentence? If incarceration permanently destroys a person's ability to function, connect, or exist meaningfully, what has been accomplished? Deterrence fails. Rehabilitation is abandoned. Public safety is not improved. What remains is punishment for its own sake. And punishment without purpose becomes cruelty. The worst prisons in America are not defined by their walls, their cells, or their security measures. They are defined by intent. Intent to isolate. Intent to neglect. Intent to endure suffering rather than resolve it. For those sentenced into these places, freedom is no longer the opposite of prison. It is something that exists only as a memory. And for many, the sentence does not end at execution, release, or death. It ends when the system decides it has taken enough.